So in the aftermath of Charlie Kirk's shooting death, President Trump has been quick to point the finger of blame, even when a suspect had not yet been arrested, and a motive for the killing still unknown.
How do we fix this country? How do we come back together?
I'll tell you something that's going to get me in trouble, but I couldn't care less. The radicals on the right oftentimes are radical because they don't want to see crime. The radicals on the left are the problem, and they're vicious and they're horrible.
For years, those on the radical left have compared wonderful Americans like Charlie to Nazis and the world's worst mass murderers and criminals. This kind of rhetoric is directly responsible for the terrorism that we're seeing in our country today.
All right, with me right now to talk more about this, Ron Brownstein. He is a CNN senior political analyst and an opinion columnist for Bloomberg. Ron just wrote a piece for Bloomberg headline, Charlie Kirk's killing requires Trump to soothe, not inflame. Ron, great to see you.
Good morning, Fred.
So in your op-ed, you say, presidents are supposed to heal divisions after tragedy, not stoke them. We are reminded about how Clinton responded after the Oklahoma City bombing, or Obama after the Charleston church shooting. Can Trump follow the path of his predecessors by, if not now, but eventually dialing back rhetoric?
No, I think it's highly unlikely. I mean, it's hard to overstate how profoundly President Trump is not only departing from, but essentially inverting the first instinct of other presidents at a moment of national tragedy, which this is. I mean, this is a tragedy. What happened was terrible, but those are the moments when presidents historically have tried hardest to speak to and for the entire country. I mean, you mentioned Clinton after Oklahoma City, George W. Bush going to the Islamic Center a few days after 9/11 and talking about respecting all Americans, or Obama singing Amazing Grace at after the horrible Mother Emanuel shooting. Trump is not only not doing those things, he is doing the opposite. He is not only blaming one side, but ignoring the violence that has been directed against Democrats. In his remarks Wednesday night, he essentially acted as if only Republicans have been victims of political violence. And then yesterday, he went further in the clip that you played by essentially saying that radicals on the right are not a problem because fundamentally they are patriots worried about crime and undocumented migrants, and all the problem is radicalization on the left. He is behaving as the leader of a faction, not a nation. And that is fundamentally, I think, his vision of the presidency.
Even contrast President Trump's sentiments to Utah's Governor Cox. Yeah. Take a listen.
We can return violence with violence. We can return hate with hate. And that's the problem with political violence, is it metastasizes, because we can always point the finger at the other side. And at some point, we have to find an off-ramp, or it's going to get much, much worse.
So does this exemplify to, calm the country, to tone down the rhetoric? It may have to come from other leadership, states' leadership, or even private citizens to do that?
Yeah, look, I think, first of all, what his tone and his remarks are what historically we have seen more from presidents at moments of intense national division. But he is also absolutely right. I mean, whatever the motive of this one killer, and we may never, it may not map fully onto our pre-existing political divides. Whatever his motive, we know that there have been people on the right who have attacked Democratic and progressive, figures, and there have been people on the left who have attacked conservative figures. That is the reality, and he is correct that ultimately, if you don't get off of this trajectory, this is what you get. You will get more of this. I remember the day after January 6th, a former senior official in the Trump Department of Homeland Security said that she feared we were transitioning into our version of the Troubles from Northern Ireland, where you have an endless cycle of retaliatory violence in which political, violence is much more common than it had been in our past. That is clearly the future we are looking toward if we don't find a way to get off of the cycle. We did get off of it after the 60s and early 70s. It can be done, but it does require a broad consensus, basically saying this is unacceptable wherever it comes from. And that really is not a message you're hearing enough from the president.
All right, very powerful. Ron Brownstein, great to hear from you. Thanks so much.
Thanks for having me, Fred.
All right. Still many questions about the suspect in this case, Tyler Robinson, and the role his family played in the identification of him, which led to his arrest. Joining me right now is criminologist Casey Jordan. Good to see you, Casey. So first, what stands out to you on, this 33-hour manhunt, then the apprehension of Robinson's, largely because his own father and others recognized him in the picture?
Correct. And, it was 33 hours and there was a lot of, bravado when there was finally a press conference. But the truth is they had no idea who he was, what kind of car he was driving, what his name was, how old he was, whether he was a student there. If this young man had not contacted his roommate with these messages and been captured on university security footage, which was put out by the media, I don't know that we would know right now who he was. But once his father saw him on that very well publicized footage of all of the security footage from the shooting, he recognized his own son. And be very clear, there were no warning signs. This is not anybody who has a criminal history or any history that we know of mental illness. This is a family that is conservative, Republican, Mormon. His father is a sheriff, a law enforcement officer from a really good family, by all accounts, with two younger brothers. There were no signs. But when that father recognized his own son, confronted him, received a confession of sorts from him, an implication that he was indeed the shooter, and then very carefully reached out to a family friend, a minister in their church, who coordinated the surrender of Tyler to the authorities. But without the family's cooperation, Tyler had intended to kill himself. He told his father he would rather be dead than arrested.
I mean, it's a fascinating sequence of events, and like you just described, that kind of intervention with the parent who said, "Wait a minute, let's talk about this," and being confronted by the parent. So Tyler Robinson is also described, as someone who was very quiet, by a former coworker who said, he didn't really want to talk about politics. However, during some family dinner, it was discussed that, Tyler Robinson was critical of Trump and even of Charlie Kirk. So what will you be looking for to try to understand why Robinson would have resorted, allegedly, to this?
Well, I look very, as a professor, I look at the fact that he was a presidential scholar coming out of high school, and incredibly bright, 34 out of 36 on the ACT, which means he got basically a full ride at Utah State, but he only lasted one semester. And I have to ask why, because he had so much potential, academic potential. Very often I see this in college freshmen. The change to college is very abrupt, and they find themselves in a pit of depression. What happened to him over the last 4 years? He has been apprenticing as an electrician, but I wonder if he's always felt out of sync, that the profession that he's studying for and practicing is really not in sync with his academic ability. I'm going to say something a little courageous here. I think that if you want to think of Charlie Kirk and Tyler Robinson as more alike than unalike, just kind of two opposite sides of the same coin, incredibly intelligent young men. But at some point, there was a void or a hole in the heart of this alleged shooter, and he filled it with political vitriol. But according to his friends, he wasn't right or left. He had criticisms for both sides. He simply felt that both sides were destroying America.
Wow.
And eventually found it in himself to do this horrific act of violence, perhaps to feel like he was making a difference.
Interesting. But, just as you speak of, or what it seemed to be, this kind of pattern of being very elusive, right? I mean, we see the videotape, the surveillance tape, the person who carried this out wants to get away, however, leaves markers, leaves evidence like messages on bullet casings. I mean, as a profiler, what do you see there about trying to get away, being elusive, yet at the same time wanting to be known or sending a very strong message?
Correct. But I mean, let's focus on the fact that everyone described him as quiet, where Charlie Kirk knew how to use his words, was incredibly articulate. It would seem that this alleged shooter did not know how to use his words and to express his anxiety about the state of America. So the writings, we know he played a lot of video games. This is a matter of record. And the writings on the guns and the bullets not only kind of emulates things that other shooters have done by writing on their guns and their ammo, but also it was these kind of immature insults that you get from video games, these trolling things that really don't make any sense to outsiders. They're in-jokes and they're sarcastic and basically really immature. And that kind of shows that he was somebody who felt like he had a lot to say, but didn't know how to get words out of his mouth.
Wow.
Wrote them down and then horrifically chose violence as a means of expression instead of his words. So, what Charlie Kirk stood for, which was civil debate, is really the takeaway. If we can have civil discussions about these things, perhaps people who feel like they can't talk will find a voice.
Yeah, so fascinating. That's why I wanted to hear from you. Casey Jordan, thanks so much.